And good evening to our fellow listeners. This is on July 16th at 8:20 p.m. This is Federico Lines of States' Rights Radio.
And Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight's episode, our Bill of Rights are universal, our government is limited. And tonight we're going to be talking about a few Supreme Court cases, both of them kind of dealing with the double jeopardy, basically rule that you're not allowed to be charged twice for the same crime if you're exonerated. We kind of, I think one of the reasons we should talk about these types of rulings that don't get the media attention that some of the other Supreme Court decisions got is because, these are important cases that might not elicit the same emotions that other cases bring, but, they're just as important. And, I think there should be a spotlight and discussion on whether what was ruled by the courts was right or wrong. One of those cases was just this year, just in July, the Rutherford Institute, which was involved in this case, reported on the Smith v. United States, which was a case of somebody, Timothy Smith, who was convicted for theft of trade secrets, and he was charged in the wrong location in the Middle District of Florida when he should have been charged in the Northern District of Florida, and he was found guilty originally in the wrong location. On appeal, the appeal process found that he was found guilty in the wrong location, but they held that he could be tried again in the right location. And then on appeal to the Supreme Court, the attorneys for the Rutherford Institute, Cato Institute, and the National Association for Public Defense argued that the Constitution requires a sufficient consequence to deter the government from selecting an unfair location and jury, as the British Crown did. I'm reading from the Rutherford Institute article right now, did by removing the colonial defendants overseas to England for trial of charges like treason. And the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 against Timothy Smith, so basically allowing him to be retried for the same crime, but he needs to be tried in the right location this time. Very interesting case. Double jeopardy. There's a really important reason why we have that in there, and it's really to hold government accountable, to make sure that they're doing the right processes before they charge people with crimes. I don't know if this, putting a little thought into this, I can see the Rutherford Institute's arguments here. This isn't a clear-cut case of double jeopardy to me, and compared to some other cases, but, I can see the argument. I think this is an important type of case to kind of understand and see if did the Supreme Court rule the correct way.
Yeah, and it's a good case to talk about, and it's also an alert to everybody out there, to our listeners, Seth, that they need to know their rights. We need to know our rights, and if this particular case, if he committed a crime in Alabama, but it was tried in Florida, do you know why it was tried in Florida, not in Alabama? The crime was committed in Alabama, correct?
Well, yeah. Let me go back up. He he committed theft of trade secrets, allegedly committed theft of trade secrets while living in Alabama, and it involved computer servers located in the Middle District of Florida. So the victims were in Florida, so I guess that makes sense that Florida would be charging it, but it was the Northern District of Florida that charged him, not the Middle District of Florida. So the Middle District of Florida is where he should have been charged.
Yeah, the middle. Okay, now I'm saying, always Florida commits the most stupendous and idiotic news that makes me shameful of my home state. I just, every time I hear something about Florida, I just go, oh God, what's next? Yeah, he should have been charged in the Middle District of Florida, not the Northern District of Florida. So who's the prosecutor that wanted the limelight in that? But again, that is, the Supreme Court should have issued a overrulment based on the technicality. I mean, if the judge knew about it and the judge didn't do anything and he didn't tell the prosecution or the defense team, then, even though he has been charged guilty, he was being found guilty. I mean, can you really charge him again and try it in another court because of a, incompetent federal government? I mean, there goes again our tax dollars going, into another district where he's already been tried and convicted. So I think the Supreme Court should. What was the Supreme Court's decision then?
It was 9-0 against Smith.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so he's able to be tried again, and the Supreme Court. Here's a question I'm going to put to my listeners and to us, Seth. The Constitution of the United States, the second one, has a Bill of Rights. We have our rights, and they have to be respected by the government, and yet they've seen it trampled. Now, I'm going to do because a person that I've been talking to mentioned to me about how the Articles of Confederation was wrong and there's no individual rights, but I'm going to dig into that. I'm going to see if the Articles of Confederation shows more individual rights and more respect for those individual rights. Not of course, it was doing people held in bondage, but also individual rights. If they show more sense of rights than this current one that we are in, because I hate to break it to people, but we have a Bill of Rights, and the government and the media, they don't seem to respect it. They don't seem to be knowledgeable about it. So I'm going to do a little study about that and see where which one shows more to our favor as individuals. But if the Supreme Court 9-0, so I guess the liberals with the conservatives joined in and favored law enforcement as per usual, including Clarence Thomas. Here comes again that they trampled on our rights and trampled on our freedoms just to cover up their incompetence.
Yeah, and I think an important fact in this specific case was that prior to his trial in the Northern District of Florida, the Smith's attorneys moved to dismiss the charges because they were brought in the wrong district. So, they knew before the initial trial even began that this was the wrong venue, yet they still allowed it to go forward. And, this is, we've got to hold our government accountable. And, oftentimes, there are people who there are prosecutors who are just, they're just looking to make a name. They're just looking to be saw as, tough on crime or something like that. And they make mistakes, and, criminals get off. People get off because these overzealous prosecutors make mistakes. and people don't tend to blame the prosecutors. They get upset when, say, a higher court vacates a criminal's charges because of the mistakes by the initial prosecutor. And we should hold those prosecutors accountable. It's important to understand this because, our justice system is really set up. I always remember, learning when I was young, that it's better that one innocent man, it's worse that one innocent man be found guilty than 100 guilty men go free. I mean, we need to make sure that prosecutions are done appropriately and that we're always looking to find the right party, not just, make a name for ourselves. We need to really hold those prosecutors who are just trying to make a name for themselves accountable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is a sheer case of incompetence, a sheer case of one prosecutor in a middle district in the state of Florida wanted the limelight and not giving where it's supposed to be. In the northern, prosecutor in the northern district of Florida, and not giving to the middle district of Florida, or even in Alabama, where the actual crime was committed in Alabama. I know the victims were in Florida, but the person, I thought that crimes were supposed to be committed in the same place that the crime was. The trial takes place in the exact place the crime was committed. So I thought that was part of the judicial system that set in place. But it's funny how the judicial system and the justice system, Department of Justice on the federal side, and even in its own state sometimes, you have overzealous and kind of like populist demagogues of prosecutors, and they think that they know everything, and in the end they don't. And people make mistakes, Seth. We're human. We make mistakes, but you cannot go back and says, oh well, he used to be, and they brought it to account and they ignored it. So at least they point out the mistake they made, and they should have made a change of venue. But to do it again, I think it's kind of to do it again and waste taxpayers' money and another trial is just sheer. It's what the government of today has made us, that they promote incompetence, they promote laziness, and it's just to trample on our rights. It makes me really mad that the government keeps doing that, and the media doesn't say anything. Nobody says anything, and we just keep going with this incompetent, dependent federal government and government.
Yeah, and I think some of these cases, like this 9-0, you rarely, the media loves to promote the court decisions that are split, especially the most close decisions, like 5-4 decisions. They love to really hype up these types of cases. But I think people really should look at these cases where it comes to 9-0 or even 8-1 or 7-4, like another case that you brought up with me before the show on Gamble v. United States. These are the cases where you really get to see who the Supreme Court is and how they're really very much aligned, and their allegiance is to the government. It's not to individual liberty. So I don't know if you wanted to bring up the Campbell v. United States case and what you saw in that.
Well, with Gamble v. United States, I know that I started writing about it because it goes against state sovereignty versus national sovereignty, and which case goes further, but I didn't touch base on that. But I want to touch base on the point you made with, these court decisions where they're 9-0 or 8-0 because a justice recused himself, and they just touch base on the 5-4, like on the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and but in this certain case, as well as Gamble v. or other ones that I touch in several writings of my articles on amendment number for the Fourth Amendment, I'm not surprised that Supreme Court tends to favor law enforcement, the Judicial Department. It's no surprise, and with this Supreme Court, that it's unpredictable. It's a very unpredictable court. You don't know where these are going to go. For example, as I mentioned before, Justice Neil Gorsuch. He wrote the opinion to include same-sex individuals and gender identity individuals into the Civil Rights Act. And, he just decided to include them out of the blue, like if he was a legislator. But yet, on just recently, he wrote the opinion on giving denying a Christian a religious person to deny business to a same-sex couple. So it's a very unpredictable, it's a very confusing court that we are seeing nowadays. It's like they're walking on eggshells. Do I want to offend people? Well, maybe yes here, but no here. Be honest. Stick where you stand. If you think this is constitutional, then say it. It's constitutional, but don't be so unpredictable. But with this case, it's Gamble versus V versus U.S. And Smith versus U.S., where the government is on trial. The government is. They will always make the government look good, and you can go back to all the in Plessy versus Ferguson. They want to make the government of Louisiana look good. And so they said, well, it's separate but equal, so we're going to grant the state of Louisiana to continue doing that. This is something I want to point out, that the federal government is not our friend. It's like, it's like an HR company. It's like an HR department in a company. They're not our friends. They're not here to help us. You may think that LBJ and all those says, oh, we're here for the government. We're here to help you. No, they're not here to help us. This illusion that people in the media that the federal government is here to assist us in every single thing, it's untrue. And look at it just now. They just denied Smith to another trial. Denied Smith his right to not be. They're gonna grant another trial when he already had one and he's already been tried. And they're not protecting the citizen itself. So, and the thing is that we have a Bill of Rights and people don't seem to understand. People don't, seem to grasp it, and they don't know their rights. And it's just very upsetting to see that.
Yeah. And like you said, the federal government is not our friends. More and more the state and local government aren't our friends either. But it's this mentality of entitlement and this welfare state that we live in. People are just at each other's throats over what seems like little things, and we really need to get back to the government staying in its very limited scope of authority, and again, like you said, knowing your rights is very important. I mean, it's very important. Whenever you deal with police, when you deal with local bureaucrats and your town governments, people just need to know their rights, and it's that simple. It's people need to start desiring liberty and knowing their rights, and also fighting back when they know that their rights have been trampled on. They need to fight back, and they need to stand up to lawless authority from the government.
Yeah, a quick little story to know your rights, Seth. On July 4th, I live very close by to the world famous Biltmore Hotel of Miami Coral Gables, and they every 4th of July they have a concert, and they have fireworks near the golf course, and it's a public event, and people can go, and it's just very well orchestrated by the Coral Gables Police Department and all that. And as I was about to enter the hotel, I was denied entry because I was not a guest. But it turns out that the hotel is not privately owned; it's owned by the city of Coral Gables, and it's managed by a private company, but it's owned by the city. It's a public property. So they cannot deny my entry. They're saying that only guests can come in. Okay, fine, but you're public property. If it was the Hyatt or the Hilton, that's a different story. That's a private entity, and they can do what they want. But because it's public, they can't deny me as a resident and as a citizen entry just because they just don't want the hassle of people coming in. That's not my problem. You got to make sure that people just are respectful and follow where they're supposed to go. So yeah, I called in and I say, you're a public entity. You have no right to deny me entry. If you were private, that's a different story, and they let me in. And as simple as that. You got to know your rights. You got to know what's public, what's private. And if it's a public entity, they cannot deny you entry. I mean, I don't care if there's guests there or there's no guests there. It's public, and you can come in whenever you want to. So people try to, push you down, but you've got to know your rights. And, I hope the Smiths person really, fights this charge and gets acquitted or gets a lesser charge this time around. But this, I guess because he was found guilty, they can charge him again. But, can you get charged again for the same crime in a different venue? That's a violation of that sounds like a violation of double jeopardy.
Yeah, I would agree. It does sound like a case of double jeopardy. This goes back to, what I said just early on, and this is, he might be guilty. I haven't really looked at the evidence against him because, quite frankly, this is a case that really doesn't matter to me so much the evidence of the case, because it seems like the government's being overzealous and, over prosecuting this man. We've got to hold people accountable for, hold the prosecutors accountable. And, that kind of, into the Gamble v. United States, that had to deal with a man who was prosecuted for both state and by both the state government and federal government for possessing a gun while being a felon, and apparently he was found not guilty in one of those venues, and then found guilty in another. That's even, I think, more clear case of a double jeopardy violation, but. It really gets to us holding our government accountable, and when they screw up, they need to know it, and they need to face penalties themselves for screwing up.
Yeah, and the thing with that is that the state government found him not guilty, and the federal government found him guilty, and people understand that the federal government is not supposed to have this much power. If you cross the state line, again, our Bill of Rights is for all 50 states. And, that's why I find the New Jersey state gun laws contradictory and unconstitutional, because, you are allowed to go into New Jersey, and if you have a loaded weapon, well, make sure you keep it safe and you don't do anything dangerous. And if you do, then, accidents are going to happen, crimes are going to happen, and then it's up to the government's job to take care of justice. But you cannot deny that person to cross state lines with a weapon. You cannot deny it. And this thing where this is where I have a debate with a colleague of mine a couple of times, versus articles versus the Constitution. And yes, the articles favor more state governments than federal government, but even so, the second Constitution, it favor the language. You think that it favors the federal government, but it doesn't. Like, the Commerce Clause, it says Congress has the right to regulate commerce. Regulate, administer, supervise, not enforce. It is the state's job to enforce. So the language, people have thought that, Congress has the right. No. Pay attention to the language. It's, when I look at the synonyms for regulate, it doesn't say it's a synonym for enforce. It's a synonym for supervise. So, people have really misunderstood the words of the second Constitution, and even with the Bill of Rights. And people just don't want to listen to it. Like, for example, and then we'll get to it, because this is also a violation of Smith. Well, not really particular Smith, but also other persons. For example, like Griswold versus Connecticut or Bowers versus Hardwick, where you have illegal entry of police officers into the private home of individuals, regardless of what they're doing. Like in Bowers versus Hardwick, that's his private home, and that's an invasion of his Ninth Amendment. But nobody talks about the Ninth Amendment. They talk about the 14th Amendment, like this certain substantive due process clause that they invented. And, this is the ignorance of the media and certain American citizens that don't really understand. And that's why, Seth and I am here to educate people, to let them know what their rights are. And the rights are plainly simple. Don't listen what the prosecution says, or what some populist candidate says, or whoever, or prosecution says. Your rights are right there. You need to read what your rights are and understand them.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a more foundational point about just understanding what our rights are. Is the Constitution actually gives us really what are negative rights, not positive rights. It's these are rights that the government can't do this to you. But we've gotten to a point where people think they have positive rights, where they have a right to welfare. They have a right to an education. They have a right to this. Well, no, you have a right to do things and not be abused by the government. So that's why, it's really negative rights, which are positive in my mind. I know people say, negative rights, that's not what we want. Well, yeah, that is what you want. You want the government not to do this to you, do that to you. And, I think we've kind of lost that, especially with, as you brought up, just populism. It's something that I've seen on the right with Donald Trump, and I've seen people like Tucker Carlson talk about how we need a government that cares for us. I don't want a government that cares for me. I want a government that cares about liberty and protecting my liberty. The government is not there to take care of me. I am responsible to take care of myself. And this is one of the biggest problems with populism as some type of foundational principle. Well, it's not a foundational principle. It's communism and socialism, and disguised as patriotism by these populists, and it's not. It's not patriotic to demand government take care of you, and I think that's an important foundation that has been lost, and that we need to restore. Restoring the Constitution, we need to restore some of these foundational principles that we've lost.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then, to point out what you said, in the quote, "Know your rights," it's a foundational principle. It's a Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights is foundational, but the nitty gritty of it, when you get to a case, you need to know who's doing the abusing and who's not. I mean, yes, this Smith person did commit a crime, and that's he should be punished, but he should be punished accordingly. Now, again, if the prosecution has made a mistake but does not acknowledge that mistake, then that person should be punished accordingly. But of course, they're not going to do that. With you mentioned, populism and candidates, and Donald Trump or Joe Biden, where or even DeSantis, where DeSantis even said that he doesn't want to get rid of Social Security because his voters, he wants that vote. So there again, voting for somebody for federal elections to take care of you is not really protecting your rights. And, the things that he doesn't want to abolish Social Security, but yet he's still willing for the federal government to collect that money against the citizens' will. You're forced into it to give up that money. And, this is why I despise populism in a heartbeat, because they're a bunch of, liars and thieves. As former Secretary of Treasury Andrew Mellon said, it's, talking about the income tax, it's sanctioned robbery, and it's bandits discussing how to cut up the loot. And that's what you see in D.C., that's what you see in political candidates. It's trying to cut the loot and all that, but candidates don't care. Candidates, politicians, they don't care about your rights. They just want it for their own special interests. And sadly, this Constitution has seen that in recent times, where politicians, they just talk the talk to say something, that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then when it comes to it, he won't do anything because he's protecting his special interests. And that's what this Constitution has given that. He's given a carte blanche protection. And the government doesn't have that. The government doesn't, the federal government doesn't, federal government's not there to protect its own rights. They need to protect our rights.
Yeah, and a big way to get rid. I mean, like bringing up DeSantis and Trump with it when it comes to Social Security. Trump was running these ads against DeSantis. Because DeSantis voted, I guess, when he was in Congress to raise the Social Security retirement age. Things like that. And Trump's bloviating about how, the Democrats are trying to destroy our great Social Security system. And I'm just like, what? It's now the conservative line that the Social Security system is great. And then what happens is DeSantis gets defensive, and now he's saying, I don't want to do anything to Social Security. That's just a lie from Donald Trump. And, nobody is willing to say, yeah, Social Security, it's a Ponzi scheme. It should never have been started, and we need to work on getting rid of it, however we can. I mean, and this is what happens when it comes to elections. And now we're in this state of endless elections where, right after 2020, basically the 2024 election began, this is very unhealthy for our society to just be in these endless elections where, candidates are at each other's throats constantly, and there's no governing. It's just bloviating and trying to win votes by offering free stuff, and this is just very dangerous for our society.
No, you're right, and these candidates, they're bickering between each other, and yet they're forgetting what they're there for. They're there to protect our liberties and our rights, and against the bureaucracy of the government. And they don't care. They just want to bicker and fight and see who can be the most populist and who can get their most hits on YouTube and TikTok and all that. And it's just I mean, I'm not surprised that this case went like that, because the government has always taken care of itself and they don't really care. I mean, I'm not surprised at all. I'm really not surprised how they turned out, and I'm sure that probably Trump and DeSantis will probably find a sneaky way of saying, well, Smith should be tried again because he committed this grievous and heinous crime and all that. So and we'll never come to hey, read the Constitution, double jeopardy. This sounds like it's a double jeopardy violation. Do something about it, But they won't, because, they're just out there for their own grace and not for the grace of the Republic.
Yeah, just think about it too this way, that, you could be somebody who's, let's say, politically active in your community, and some people don't like you because they don't agree with your political activism. This is a reason we don't want double jeopardy, or why we want, the double jeopardy clause, why we don't want overzealous prosecutions and stuff, is that you can very easily see somebody who's, not guilty of a crime, but the local prosecutors are, trump up charges and then charge you in a venue where they know they're going to be able to get enough people on a jury who hate you and get you punished. I mean, you're making it easier for the government to basically prosecute and find guilty people who are innocent of crimes. And that's why we need to have these in place, because we want to make sure that innocent people are not prosecuted. We're not in a perfect world. There's going to be mistakes made, and that's fine. But then we need the system to correct those mistakes once they happen. In this case, the government, the system is compounding the mistakes. So the mistakes were there, and they were pointed out right from the beginning. Smith, filed that this was in the wrong venue to begin with, and yet they still went through it. And even though they knew they were in the wrong venue, they went forward with it. He was found guilty, and the Supreme Court is basically compounding the mistakes and allowing the prosecution to continue. And we need to have a system that corrects these mistakes when they happen, not compound them.
Yeah, and one case that they did issue a technicality is Cassius Clay Muhammad Ali versus the United States, where it ruled on a technicality and not set a precedent on the Ali case, but a technicality where Ali was found genuine in his country's objection to go to not to go to war in Vietnam, and the board didn't specify which one of the three tiers they objected on, and that's a technicality. The Supreme Court should have done the same thing here. This is a clear case of gross negligence and technicality, and they should have done that. One case I want to bring up is O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson, the world famous football player and Hertz spokesman, also acquitted person of that he was tried for the murder of Nicole Brown, his ex-wife, and Ron Goldman. He was found not guilty for that trial, but yet in Nevada he was found guilty of another crime. Now I know that that's that it's he was not tried in Nevada for the murders of his ex-wife and Ron Goldman, but I mean you could make a case that this could be a double jeopardy, saying that they didn't catch him for that murder, but we'll catch him for this thing, and he went to jail for that. So I know it's two different, but if you're Johnny Cochran, you can find a way to make it a clear double jeopardy case. Saying, I know many people want to get O.J. Simpson to go to jail, so we're gonna grab him on this, and we're gonna send him to jail just because he's O.J. and he got away from murder. So you can make some sort of a case on that, but you have to be a very slick lawyer like Johnny Cochran to cook up a scheme, to cook up a story like that, or. What's the other Dream Team lawyer? Not Robert Shapiro. F. Lee Bailey. Oh, he's the one that would love to have cook up a scheme like that. But there's people need. This case is a clear violation. The Supreme Court very erroneously sided with the government and sided with the incompetence of the government. But just to point out again that I'm not surprised the Supreme Court is helping the government cover up their mistakes, because the government has always made mistakes and they will never, ever mount out to them. Never. They will always say, oh, well, we're going to be Pontius Pilate and just wash our hands and just do it again and see how that thing goes again. And I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. Even, people like Sotomayor and Kagan and Ketanji Jackson, to side with the majority on this, very unpredictable. I call it the unpredictable court. You don't know where they're going to go because, the court has been politicized too much, and it's a shame.
I remember when OJ was when that case was being prosecuted in Las Vegas, and I remember that the judge was clearly against OJ Simpson, and it's easy to look at a case like that because and kind of be happy with the judge because everybody knows OJ did it with the murder. But, he was found not guilty. I mean, that's my standard. Look, my thoughts on it are that I think OJ did it, but we have to respect that he was acquitted of it, and there's a standard of, beyond a reasonable doubt in these in felony cases. And I remember the judge in that case in Las Vegas was very unfair to O.J. Simpson and almost making sure that he was found guilty and that he gave him extra sentencing. And I'm like, put aside your thoughts on O.J. Simpson for a second. This is not a precedent that you want set for you if you're ever prosecuted erroneously. And that's what we have to look at these cases and put aside the people involved in them at the time. Think about how this can be abused against you. And innocent people can get caught up in this. And so whether you like O.J. Simpson or not, you have to make sure that the process is just as fair for him as it is for everybody else. Bringing up the Supreme Court again, and kind of what you said earlier, on a lot of these cases, the Supreme Court is not willing to, even when it comes to cases that I might agree with the opinion in some part, the affirmative action case. I generally agree that affirmative action in the way that it's being played out is wrong. But, if you read the opinion, they're not really willing to go very far. They're not willing to. They're kind of mushy opinions. Even if I kind of agree with where the opinion's coming from, they're always mushy. They always leave room for further abuse. They always leave room to protect the government's power. And so you can be excited all you want about some of these opinions, but the Supreme Court is not going to actually take a hard stand in support of individual liberty. They're always going to make sure that power stays in the hands of the federal government. And we need to kind of push back against that and, just point it out too. We just need to, kind of not use the rhetoric. A lot of conservatives, these big wins that they had. Well, read the opinions. They weren't big wins. They're maybe a win for a short term, but that we are so lost as a society, and that's how we really need to get back to people desiring individual liberty, and that's a big hill to climb, but that's the hill we should be climbing.
No, you're right, and I've always told people to read opinions of the court to see where they stand, and the federal government, the federal court will never, be truthful in their opinions. They will always leave some sort of a loophole, and not only the high court, but even state courts has left loopholes that people will find to navigate through and create a new law to navigate through that loophole. And I'm sick to tired that everything has to be resolved by judicial review. I'm really tired of that. The courts, they're there to review the law, but not to create the law, not to amend or repeal the law. Their job is to review it and kick it back to where it needs to be kicked back for further review and further review and either through amendments or repeal or whatever. So, for example, like the decisions that affect me more than affirmative action or the Christian Science, the Christian web designer. Those are just petty courts that they're dispute between private enterprises and all that. But it's the one that's signing the electoral decisions of our states and our nation that they want to inflict judicial review in state or federal courts. But yet, when you read the concurring opinion of Justice I like beer Kavanaugh, he gives a loophole that there should be. Oh no, I'm sorry. I think it was. Oh no, my apologies. It was Chief Justice Roberts, where he state courts retain the authority to apply constitutional restraints when legislators act under the power conferred upon them under the Election Clause, but it should not go above that state court review. So he's saying that they have the power, but yet again they need to know what their power is. And it's flimsy. It's setting loopholes and setting more problems and going back to the courts. And we need to really overturn Marbury versus Madison because they have misunderstood the whole purpose of judicial review. And it just also infuriates me too, Seth, that judicial review means that they need to apply what the law is. No, they need to interpret what the law is and kick it back to where it needs to be kicked for them to further review it.
Yeah, and that's really a matter of process that that's one of the areas we've lost our understanding, and that allows the courts to play games and get away with it because the people don't realize that these processes aren't being followed appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. So for my final thought on this, Seth, I hope that I don't. If this person Smith committed a crime, then he should go to crime. He should be dealt accordingly and sent to prison and to pay for his crimes. But I don't believe he needs to be charged again. And I hope that some wise judge in Florida, very unlikely, but let there be a wise judge in Florida in the Middle District to understand the technicality and, not waste the taxpayers' money yet again for the incompetence that the government is. So let him serve out his time that he was charged with and let it be it. But I don't think there should be a second trial on a sheer negligence and incompetence by the government. In this case, also the federal government.
Yeah, I'll say on this case, on Smith, I'm kind of surprised because, we're not dealing with some violent criminal. We're dealing with somebody who was convicted of theft of trade secrets.
Yeah.
And, I would have thought that the courts, the courts still like to act as if they care about our rights, even though they don't. That I would have thought that if this were some like violent criminal, it'd be easier to sell this to the public. But we just need to start holding them accountable and making sure that when mistakes are made, they're corrected and not compounded, and it really is something that we need to do to change the system's culture to get back to true liberty.
You're right. And one point I want to make: it's a white collar crime, so it's not that egregious. He just committed he committed a crime, and it's against the law, but it's a white collar crime. But what I was thinking is that this is the first time where they put the word white as in a negative aspect, and yet they put blue collar crimes as also. So it's the first time that you see that white is as a negative aspect and not black crime. So I just find that kind of funny. It says, hey, you're right. You know what? It's a white collar crime. It's the first time they used the word white as a negative aspect.
It's just a non-violent crime.
Yeah.
Let's make sure the processes are followed.
Exactly, and no more sheer negligence and incompetence by the government. But I mean, that's just too much to bear with them because there's always going to be sheer negligence and incompetence by the government. There always is.
Yeah.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back next Sunday with more on Restore the Constitution. And Seth, great discussion, and have yourself a great night.
Yep, good night.
Bye.